Today's topic with Maria will be it's not a crime to fight for an army during a war. Since there are too little characters possible, the title has became shortened. Therefore, it's not a crime to fight for an army. That is a part of human behavior since dawning of times. But hopefully those who are familiar with our past space, which was on last Tuesday, we are going to discuss legal aspects and let's say therapeutical aspects of something which has happened 80 years ago to Slovenian nation and to other nations as well. So for now, since there are very few listeners, Maria, I would like just to give you the word. Let's just begin. This will be recorded, put on YouTube, as was the last one. So please begin your today's conversation with me. Thank you very much.
Hello, Blaž. Thank you, and thank you for everyone for listening. Can you hear me okay?
Excellent.
Okay, wonderful. I want to remind everyone that they can ask questions at the end and also ask them in Slovenian. First of all, I want to reiterate what we discussed last week briefly. The reason I'm doing this and the reason Blaž does this is that we want Slovenia to succeed. To accomplish this, facts from World War II and the post-World War II massacres must be publicized in a recognized institution which everyone considers to be the truth. It must be taught in schools and curriculums must be revised. To succeed, Slovenia must become a true democracy, which it has never been. So I thought I would briefly go over what it means to be a democracy, since I'm discussing a subset of that only. A true democracy is a system of government where the supreme power is vested in the people and exercised directly or through elected representatives. It relies on citizen consent. It protects individual liberties and balances majority rule with minority protections. Now, there are generally six components in a democracy. I won't discuss all of them at length, but Blaž may consider doing so. The first is free and fair elections. The second is the rule of law, which I discuss pretty much in all my discussions. That means all citizens and government officials must be equal before the law. Laws must be applied impartially, and they must protect against tyranny and arbitrary arrests. A third component is protection of human rights. Human rights are fundamental freedoms. This includes freedom of speech, religion, association, and the press. And the press must be fiercely guarded. The fourth is political pluralism, or a system, a multi-party system that allows for a wide range of ideas, open debate, and peaceful political opposition. A democracy must have separation of powers. Government must be structured with checks and balances, such as having an independent judiciary. And the reason for that is to prevent any one branch or individual from monopolizing power. And the sixth component I want to mention is citizen participation. This requires an active public engagement. For example, when we give a talk or I put on a tour The public is invited, all the press is invited, but they are not all engaged. I don't have most of the press there. Why is that? When they come, they don't ask questions. Why is that? Citizens have the right and responsibility to participate in public life, to protest, and they need to be able to hold leaders accountable. The elected officials are answerable to the electorate, and they must conduct public business openly. So primarily for me, the comment I have for Slovenia is by failing to acknowledge communist crimes, the result is a lack of faith in government accountability. And secondly, it damages equal protection under the law. So before I go forward, Blaž, do you want to give any political commentary on the components of a democracy?
The list of 7 topics or 7 pillars you mentioned, I believe they are quite tested around the world. If I would go judging or describing the status of all of them in Slovenia, it would take a whole new show, discussion, another hour. But let's just say that in my experience, elections are not completely fair, because in connection to the other important element would be the press. You said the press should be fiercely guarded. In Slovenia, it is fiercely guarded, but in a wrong sense, meaning that before mentioned red deep state still held until now the great systems of media, the mainstream media, MSM, meaning in Slovenia RTV, radio, television, national, the state, if you want. And the other channel is Pop TV. And they're both leaning visibly towards the so-called left, which is the remaining network of non-illustrated communist regime. Judiciary power branch has not been illustrated whatsoever. It's very much independent, and many would say they are mostly independent from their guild, from their expertise, which is law. So even I have experienced in my own cases, which I had, that they are much leaning and they're the source of breaching the law. So in short, and what you also already said, people are passive. People are not daring. People have fear over public speech, public speaking. So these are all the elements or the remains, the results of past decades when it was more towards Orwellian state than anything else. So yeah, that would be my short comment.
All right, great, thanks. I want to move on to, before I get to what I call it, the more academic part of what I'm going to speak, I want to answer online questions that any of you might have beforehand. And so I want to answer a question from Anna, who asked, how does the FBI detect or recognize lies and misleading answers during the interrogation? Well, I want to thank you for the question, Anna. I did answer very shortly on X because they don't give us any space to do more. And there I said that the best way to recognize lies is to know the answers before you ask the questions. Now that might sound funny, but actually, this is and we are able to do that many times. But being as prepared and knowledgeable as possible really makes a difference when interviewing difficult witnesses or suspects. Also, interviewing the person's associates in advance will provide a better background for the investigator. The associates will know personal things about the suspects, which helps with the number one best method: know the answers before you ask the questions. There are some basic understandings regarding interviewing that all experienced investigators know. Generally, one can tell if a suspect is nervous, uncomfortable, won't look the investigator in the eye. It could be a sign of lying. However, body language should never be used as a determining factor by itself. But I have to add that for the most part, FBI agents do not have the opportunity to interview suspects. And this is because in the United States, a person cannot be compelled to speak with law enforcement, under some exceptions, but in general, that's the case. Many suspects say that they do not want to talk and they cannot be forced to. And the FBI in the United States, we do interviews, not interrogations. Interrogation would be a better term for a country where a suspect or person is required to speak, but their statement and words cannot be taken against them. In the United States, what they say can always be taken against them, and this is why they are not forced to speak. All right, I want to move on to the topic of today. It's not a crime to fight in an army. War is legal. War between legal armies is legal, not criminally prosecutable. The focus should be on individual criminal responsibility and not collective guilt. And one thing that I was involved in at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, which was developing the rules of the road, where we set the rules going forward for modern international law. And before I get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about my background in the FBI, and just say a little about how I got there. I grew up in the United States. I studied criminal justice, political science in college. And in the United States, law is a graduate school. So I also have a law degree, which is another 3 years after the undergraduate is finished. I became a prosecutor in Seattle, Washington. I specialized in sexual assault prosecutions and domestic violence prosecutions. In 1985, I joined the FBI as an agent. At that time, it was still considered uncommon for a woman to be an agent in 1985. I felt that I really needed to be better than the men in order to be considered equal, unfortunately. Now, many people are not clear on what FBI agents do. I often get questions about, is that the CIA or something like that? FBI agents are law enforcement officers. They carry weapons in the United States. They are like police, but they're federal police. Most of what they do is much the same that the Slovenian police do. I worked with the Slovenian police back when I was an agent. FBI agents are not CIA. CIA are not law enforcement agents. They only operate as spies in other people's countries. The FBI is not permitted to do that. The FBI strictly enforces federal law and polices its own agents very strictly. I worked in FBI offices, a number of them, but before I went to the International Criminal Tribunal, I had worked in field offices in California, San Juan, Puerto Rico, and the Washington field office. In Puerto Rico, I served as a supervisor of the fraud, white-collar crime, corruption investigation unit in Puerto Rico. From the Washington, D.C. field office, I was selected by the FBI and then our State Department, that's our diplomatic service, to serve as an expert on mission to the International Criminal Tribunal, and that was in 1994. That meant that the federal government of the United States sent me. They sent 20 of us to the International Criminal Tribunal in order to start it. They were concerned it would never get off the ground if countries argued about this, negotiated terms. They knew there was a short window, so they selected 20 very experienced people, prosecutors, investigators, some forensic experts, that could just hit the ground running, meaning we got there, there's no training needed. I can read a manual very quickly and the laws, and I can go out and do an interview the first day in accordance to the United Nations rules and guidance. So I was selected on the because of my expertise in sexual assault investigations and prosecution. I was in 1994, I was the first female investigator at the International Criminal Tribunal. I was sent on the tribunal's first investigative mission into the former Yugoslavia, and that was during the war. And I was an investigative team leader because I'm also an attorney. I did legal work for the tribunal. I worked as an investigator, interviewed around 1,000 victims of concentration camps. I served as an investigative team leader on many missions into Bosnia and Croatia. I wrote indictments, participated on the legal review team of the ICTY, and I also went on diplomatic missions. So, to talk about the topic of today, that was my little introduction. Later in the tribunal, after the war was over, we did something beginning in 1996. This is after the Dayton Peace Agreement in November 1995, and the war was over. We set out to write rules for Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia to follow. Because the tribunal could not take thousands and thousands of cases to prosecute war crimes by itself, we knew that the national courts of these countries would need to do it themselves. So we gave them rules to follow. What we didn't want them to do, which is what they did from at the outset, was to charge all the soldiers who had fought against them. And we clearly said that they could not prosecute people simply for fighting in an army. So these rules that we wrote were called the rules of the road. And this most important rule was that the countries could not use charges to go after their political opponents. Now, moving to World War II, just checking in. Blaž, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Clearly, all the time.
Yeah.
I'm just.
Thank you.
I already have one question specifically on politically motivated prosecution, but we will leave it for later.
Okay, thanks. I just want to make sure we're there.
Sure.
So after World War II, I think everyone's heard of Nuremberg. Former members of the German army, and I'm not talking about the SS, just the regular German army. There are a lot of, they were generally not prosecuted for having served in the German army. Prosecutions focused on specific crimes only. The SS leadership and the SS was declared a criminal organization, but the Slovenian Home Guard was never subjected to international judicial determination. At the ICTY, we had authority over grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions. Those included violations of laws or customs of war, genocide, crimes against humanity, and they had to have been committed between 1991 and 1995. We also had primacy over national courts, meaning that we could require a case that was in the national courts of Bosnia, Croatia, or Serbia, that it be transferred to The Hague. From the outset of our investigations, we repeatedly rejected the idea of collective guilt. I often hear this still in Slovenia, that everyone is guilty of something. Even in cases involving organizations later found responsible for atrocities, and back in 1990s here, individual criminal responsibility had to be proven. Prosecutors needed evidence that an accused person had committed crimes, ordered such crimes, participated in a criminal enterprise, or knowingly exercised command responsibility by knowingly failing to prevent or punish subordinates. So at the ICTY, soldiers were not prosecuted for serving in an army. You have a Bosnian Serb soldier, he's got a Bosnian Serb uniform on. Nobody prosecuted him for serving in an army. These actions are based on principles of international humanitarian law and the ICTY's own jurisprudence. Mere participation in a lawful armed force is not a crime. The 4 lawful armies we considered to be the army of the Republika Srpska, the Croatian army, the army of Bosnia-Herzegovina, and the Yugoslav army. International law distinguishes between lawful combatancy, which includes fighting soldiers, defending positions, and participating in military operations. None of these are crimes under international law. We distinguish between those and war crimes. War crimes, on the other hand, include murdering civilians, executing prisoners of war, torture, rape, deporting civilians, deliberate shelling of civilian targets, and destruction without military necessity, such as deliberate destruction of cultural monuments, churches. At the tribunal, we determined that only these kinds of acts could justify prosecution. So, from 1996 on, and these courts, I don't know if they're still going on. They were still going on in Serbia when I worked there in 2014. Before the local authorities in Bosnia, Croatia, or Serbia could arrest anyone for committing crimes in the 1990s war, we at the ICTY had to review the evidence to prevent politically motivated arrests. We made it very clear that local authorities could not arrest former soldiers of the opposing side without proper evidence. We also stressed that under international in any army is not a criminal offense. This is international law going forward. It was formed by us in 1996 and it continues today. If we apply this modern 1990s ICTY standard to the issue of whether a Slovenian home guard would be prosecuted today, the answer is no. Membership in the home guard alone would not be sufficient. There would have to be evidence of individual criminal conduct. If such a test were applied, individual home guards could have been charged, for example, for torturing and killing partisans at Sveti Ur, right, near Ljubljana there. Those who participated in the Black Hand, Crna Roka, was it Crna Roka? Organized could have been individually charged with crimes because there are many, I think, solid testimonies of people saying that they were torturing and killing partisans. Those are war crimes and crimes against humanity. But, and this is very important, the majority of home guards did not participate in such actions. We estimate that only 10% of the home guard committed crimes. These 90% would not be held responsible for the crimes committed by others under international law, under today's standards. In 1943, the Slovene Home Guard accepted weapons from the Germans, and some cooperated with the Germans because they wanted to fight the partisans. They were, arguably, they said, fighting in self-defense. These acts by themselves do not prove war crimes, certainly not automatically. Many resistance and anti-communist groups throughout Europe received support from larger powers, including Germany. Many men in the Slovene Home Guard joined primarily for reasons of self-defense against partisan violence and communist revolution. They accepted German support because they lacked alternatives. International law recognizes that individual responsibility may be affected by coercion, duress, necessity, and the involuntary nature of service under occupation. Actually, at the tribunal, we had such a case. Off the top of my head, I don't remember the name of the case, where one soldier argued that he was put under coercion and duress. So we did address this issue even there. So critics emphasize that there was an oath that Germany required of many of the Slovene home guards beginning in April 1944. It's televised, certainly been used as an argument against the home guards and as an argument for collaboration since that time. And they say it's evidence of collaboration. First of all, I want to point out that not all the home guards took an oath to Germany, specifically the Primorski Domobranci, the littoral home guard, did not take the oath to Germany. Their Colonel Kokel refused to have them do so. And the defenders of the home guard for anti-communist self-defense, and that this mandatory oath occurred after German authorities made it a condition for continued existence and armament. In other words, they're already fighting in the home guard. They're trying to defend themselves from slaughter by the partisans, who are increasingly getting more arms because they're getting them from the Allies. And then the Germans give them an oath, say you must take it, and it's you either do the oath or we take away all your weapons, and then they know there'll be mass slaughter. And that's not being, made up or crazy. We see from World War II post-war massacres, that's exactly what they intended, and it's exactly what they did when they weren't armed. So, and also I want to say a defense, when these defenses are very important in modern international law. Home guards took an oath to the Kingdom of Yugoslavia twice. They did it in fall 1943 and again in January 1945. So any investigators, prosecutors in modern international courts would consider intent. What did they believe? Who did they pledge their oath to? Did they want to be part of Nazi Germany, or did they take an oath to the Kingdom of Yugoslavia? Their motivation is very important in international modern law because it's not collective guilt, it's individual. So, applying the principles developed by us at the ICTY going forward, membership in the Slovene Home Guard alone would not be sufficient to establish criminal responsibility. Modern criminal law rejects collective guilt, requires proof of individual conduct. Accepting German weapons, serving in anti-partisan military formation, meaning home guard or even another one, or taking an oath, which is required by the occupying authorities. Those by themselves do not constitute war crimes. Prosecutors would still be required to demonstrate that a particular individual committed crimes, ordered them, or otherwise incurred responsibility under recognized principles of international law. Some individual members of the Slovene Home Guard may have participated in criminal acts, and they could and should have been held accountable for those acts. But responsibility for such crimes cannot automatically be extended to all members of the organization. So, in summarizing this part, under standards developed by contemporary international tribunals, 1996 going forward till today, guilt is personal, it is not collective, and the rejection of collective guilt remains one of the central achievements of modern international criminal law. All right, Blaž, why don't you go ahead with your question?
Yeah. So the question that was put out in Slovene goes in English like this. The law of war and participation in war. How does international law distinguish between a combatant, a collaborator, and a civilian who supports the military? Where is the legal line between criminal collaboration and legitimate military service during wartime?
Well, that's a good question, and that's a complicated one, and it's a complicated answer. First of all, I didn't write it all that down. Combatant, civilian
and collaborate. So combatant, collaborator, and a civilian who supports the military.
Okay. And are we talking 1945 or?
Yeah. 40s,
or
early 40s. Yes. No, early 40s. I mean,
right.
you have already emphasized the development of international law.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that will require kind of a long answer, but just in summary, this was before the 1948 Geneva Conventions, and it was a time when collective guilt and individual guilt is a lot murkier. A combatant is generally someone who fights for a lawful military force. A collaborator is that's a little trickier because that can also be determined by the individual country, not just international law, so that complicates it. And a civilian who supports is still a civilian, so that one's completely different. Now go back, what was the question about the combatant, collaborator, and civilian? Blaž?
Yeah, a microphone on. Where is the legal line between criminal
Uh,
collaboration and
yeah,
legitimate military service during wartime?
yeah, yeah. Um, Generally, I mean, I am going to talk more about collaboration and traders in the next section. Not today, but generally in 1945, the way the Allies looked at it was those who supported the Allies were armies on their side. There were combatants. Others on the other side were also combatants, but they might consider them collaborationist units. I did spend a week at the London Archives recently and read through 1,000 of these documents. And I do see that the British also, they didn't pit everybody together. They didn't say the Slovene Home Guards are all collaborators. They had a lot of if, buts, and whats. And they were saying, yeah, but a lot of them are on our side, and they're different than the Ustasha, who in 1941 became allied with the Nazis. They were trying to make these distinctions, but it was difficult for them because international law wasn't written very well back then. It wasn't written for World War II. So I would say they made distinctions, but clearly they made them for the Germans and the SS. They worked on that. But for all the other combatants, it's much murkier, and then it's complicated by the Russians, White Russians, Yalta, where the Allies agreed to repatriate even Russian civilians. They did not do so for Yugoslavia, and they do talk about that too. Um,
My
so
my
that's as close as I can get to it right now without drawing up a lot of. I'm going to talk
just a
about this
short
next.
just a short idea or fact to ponder
Yeah.
upon the difference between different levels of collaboration. I mean, I've heard stories that in Slovenia, the Home Guard or Domobranci have also sometimes been able to rescue Allied pilots who frequently fell on the grounds of Slovenia. In general, the partisans were rescuing those pilots, but even the partisans had episodes that killed, in which they killed some fighters sent from the Allies, Slovene fighters who were
Yeah.
sent by the Allies to fight Germans, obviously, in Slovenia. But the partisans, as I'm aware, eliminated such attempts and people involved. But on the other hand, if we say that Domobranci did few times save Allied pilots, in a case of Ustashi, you could hardly say so that they would be able to rescue or even think of rescuing Allied pilots.
Well, that's true. In both cases, Allied pilots were rescued both by partisans and by Home Guards. Those are documented. And again, this was I actually saw some communications in the British archives where they recognized that the Home Guards had saved pilots. So that was noted by the British. It goes to intent, though, too, which, of course, what was their intent? Their intent was to join Nazi Germany. They wouldn't be rescuing Allied pilots. In another session, which I won't talk about today, was the entire secret underground network that the Home Guards had, and they even kept it from their own general, I mean, the administration. This was done entirely without the higher levels of the Home Guards. And they did this for 4 years at great risk themselves. So that certainly shows that they were not pro-German. They were actually sending quality intelligence to the Allies.
Just to add that this part of history, in my knowledge, is completely empty regarding general knowledge of Slovenes. I mean, any kind, it's still unheard of that official historians would recognize any good deeds by the Home Guards.
Well, some historians do, but I guess it depends on who you talk to. I have provided evidence of one of these rescues to the military museum in Piłka, so I'm waiting for them to add it to their exhibit of combatants who saved Allied pilots, not just the partisans, but also the Home Guards. And I have the proof. I mean, there were certified letters from the American pilots sent to the Home Guards, former Home Guards living in the United States, thanking them for saving them and detailing exactly what they did. So there is definitely proof. It just needs to be publicized and recognized. And if we had such an institute that would take these facts, I would send them there. That's why we need it, because that one has definitely been proved. But like you said, it's not well. It's certainly not well known. And the whole concept of collaboration, that's really murky too. I mean, you can look at it from, there's a legal definition, and then there are also historians that have written on it. For example, the legal definition of collaboration is essential element is intent, mens rea, meaning that the individual must knowingly seek to assist the enemy or undermine their own state. The conduct must result in harm to national security, sovereignty, protecting civilians. So, like I was saying, the intent, was it the intent of the Home Guard to assist the enemy? Germany, Italy, and there's more than one enemy, right? Did they want to undermine their own state? No, the fact that the Home Guards took oath to the Kingdom of Yugoslavia shows the opposite, in fact, that they did not intend to harm the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. There are several historians who have written about collaboration. One is Peter Davies. A lot of people are familiar with the book Dangerous Liaisons. He discusses different types of collaboration in Western and Eastern Europe. And he looks at ideological commitment, active, willing participation, political alignment, partnership, and involvement in repression and persecution. Davies defined it as a collaborator as one that believed in Nazi ideology. So he's only looking at it from Nazi, and they're committed to collaborating without any restrictions. They believed in hope for the realization of the Nazi order. Well, if you're going to use that as a definition, definitely the Home Guard doesn't apply, because I interviewed a lot of them. I'm pretty old. In the 1990s, when I was in Slovenia a lot, I was interviewing them. I can't say there was a single one that liked anything to do with Germany or the Nazis, and they hated the Germans, they said. So it definitely does not fit the definition under Peter Davies. But then I need to also make a point here, which Boris Mlakar, who wrote the classic book Slovensko domovranstvo, it says it's difficult to compare Western and Eastern Europe because Western Europe didn't have the communist component, not the way that Eastern Europe did. And that really changes the concept of collaboration in Eastern Europe, because people who are anti-communist had to fight a civil war within an international war. The international war is against the Germans, but there's a civil war, which we also had to look at the tribunal in the 1990s, civil war between partisans and home guards in Slovenia. And also authors often don't take into account, so many books are not written with Slovenia in mind. They might include Yugoslavia, but Slovenia is not Yugoslavia. It is quite different. They don't take into account that Slovenia was completely assimilated by Nazi Germany, and it was the only country in Europe to suffer from all three forms of totalitarian. Three, okay? Nazism, fascism, and communism. Authors typically leave out any discussion of fascist Italy, which, of course, was extremely significant in the first half of the war, and very importantly, before World War II started, fascist Italy had occupied a huge part of Slovenia, which in turn, people say, I don't want fascist Italy, I want the alternative, whatever that is.
May I just add a little bit? Thank you. People who are not familiar with Slovene history in the Second World War might be a bit surprised to know that Slovenia was occupied by 4 different states. If we begin on the west with Italy, on the north and east by Germany, in the complete east by Hungary. The division was Mura River, and even some villages independent state of Croatia took for themselves. And after in the Socialist Federative Republic of Yugoslavia, we didn't quite learn about this Croatian detail. I just want to add a little bit. I was shocked hearing and realizing that until now, even in international historical spheres, this fact which you mentioned about communism being the 4th or 5th player in the game, it's not accepted. It's not recognized as an issue, and I believe it's very important.
It is. The EU commissioned a publication, which I'm sure you've read, Crimes Committed by Totalitarian Regimes, in 2008. There are many articles about Slovenia. Petar Jambrek was the one who headed that. And they stressed around, they discuss all the countries, the communist countries, but they stress, and really the point of that study is that there were 3 totalitarian regimes. And that communism must be looked at and evaluated similarly to the other forms of totalitarianism. So I hope that this new government will put out a new similar type of publication. 2008 was a while ago. It would be good to have another one and evaluate the state of where each country has come since that time. I wanted to add, besides the 4 armies that were occupying Slovenia at the beginning of World War II, it wasn't like anyone could escape, right? You've got fascist Italy in your country, and further west, you have Italy, right? To the north, you have Austria. They're certainly not helping. And then to the south, you have fascist independent state of Croatia, Ustaša, which then cut off Slovenia from its own army, the Royal Army of Yugoslavia and Serbia. So if you're in the middle here, and you're a target by pretty much everybody. And it was assimilated by Nazi Germany. Sometimes people think it's just constant fighting everywhere. No, they simply rolled in, after 2 or 3 days, and they took over. So people working at the administrative area in Ljubljana, for example, which my grandfather was an administrator for the city. One day they're working for the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, and the next day, well, it's Italian authorities for the first half of the war. And it's a different concept than just having battles everywhere. People don't really follow that.
Okay. Maria, it's like we have only 12 minutes left. I would like to just use the opportunity to explain that tomorrow is the 35th Statehood Day of Slovenia, and it's time for reflection. In Slovenia, many political actors are giving interviews and debates, and one of those surely is still, alas, the history of Second World War, which led up to today, and many look in retrospective and see that too little has changed to call it liberty or freedom. So we got our independence, but we did not yet liberated ourselves. Now the question is from whom? And I would now for me to conclude actually, and the floor is yours. And perhaps if somebody is able to raise a voice and put some questions or comments. My final question has been posted from Anna. Politically motivated prosecutions. How do you determine in practice whether a prosecution is politically motivated or based on evidence? What safeguards exist in international courts, ICTY, to prevent this?
Well, those are good questions. I'm going to refer to the United States on this because generally politically motivated, that's a question that occurs within one country rather than at an international tribunal. I mean, there's specific issues, but usually the tribunal is a tribunal centered around a conflict, right? And that's why they're there looking at for war crimes, crimes against humanity. Politically motivated, as far as our review at the ICTY in the 1990s, was looking at whether Croatians would just charge Serbs, Serbs would just charge Muslims. Are they able to actually charge their own people, right? I went on the first diplomatic mission to Croatia in September 1994, where we met with the Minister of Interior at that time, with the man who committed suicide, Praljak. Mostar, blew up the Mostar Bridge. That was interesting.
Praljak.
Praljak, yes, I remember him. And remember that. And then a year or so later, there was a Croatian team that was at the ICTY were gathered, and they were looking for crimes committed by Croats, and they were going to go in and look through their files. So now I had already done that September 1994, so I recall what they looked like. So my advice to the Croatian perpetrator team was, if you want to look at political motivations, I said, go through the files where they are charging Serbs, and then go through the files where they charge their own and compare the difference in investigative method. Are they just as thorough when they're dealing with someone of another ethnicity, or is it really scarce or dismissed? And that was a good way to start, specifically with the former Yugoslavia. Now, I'll answer it within a country that is already operating a democratic, certainly the judiciary in the United States, because I worked on public corruption as well. And so this would come up when, for example, the FBI, we found bribery in Congress, or because we have 50 states, every state has their own legislature. So what our Department of Justice really in every administration required was if we found that people were taking bribes, Speaker of the House, legislators, is the FBI only looking at Democrats or only looking at Republicans? Maybe we need to spread the look around and make sure that it's not political, right? That we're not going after one party and not another. Now, it might be that just one party is, but the FBI was required to make the same kind of effort on both parties. And that was one way to do it. Now, there are many others, but that's the one I remember off the top of my head. If I remember a better example, I'll think about it. I was involved in the lead up to the prosecution of the mayor of Washington, D.C., and that was a pretty big deal. The FBI really got clobbered for that one, meaning they got attacked because the mayor of Washington, D.C. was African American, and that makes it really leaves the question, is he being targeted because of his race? Well, not specifically, because most of the administrators in the District of Columbia are African American, because that reflects the population. Nevertheless, in developing those kind of cases, it's not just often the FBI is left in its own field office and local prosecutors in the same city will review it. But when it's of national significance or it could become an international scandal, the Justice Department of Washington, D.C. also gets involved and will conduct their own review, making sure that it's not politically motivated.
Well,
Go ahead, Blaž.
from my side, I would be able only to add some, funny stuff about Slovenia, and would like to hear people from abroad. You said that there were some comments from abroad. People liked to listen to our space on YouTube.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, they are all invited to participate, to ask, and get involved. We have discussed with Maria quite over many coffees, and we established that, I mean, you agree that language barrier usually is a great hindrance. So people are not aware of the state we are in Slovenia.
Yes, I think particularly correct, and more so in Slovenia than other countries in Europe, simply because it's 2 million. It's a difficult language to understand. Even professors, if they're studying Eastern Europe, they'll learn Serbo-Croatian, but they won't learn Slovenian. And so that means very few people from the outside are looking in, as opposed to the United States, where everyone is following everything the president, everyone does. I mean, it's amazing to me how much Slovenians know about the United States. It's really something. Very curious. I mean, that's good. But
this is our subconscious, because it's on the other side of the planet, and when we sleep, you live, and when they live, we sleep. And so
yeah, but it really, a legislator, they can't do things anonymously. I mean, it's on the, and that's a good thing. But because of that, I mean, people are criticized and they have to review their behavior and their speech, and that can be a very good thing. Because
I've just heard,
it's very different in Slovenia.
I've just heard one lovely description in Slovenian politics. Whenever topics arise which mean change, which bring change in established order, the left claims, "Oh, this is ideological issue." Always this label, ideological, but it's a topic that a society, a nation must get it over, must process it. And that's why I believe we are doing these spaces as well.
Yeah, it's very important to discuss this. I hear that as well. My own relatives will say this is better buried. well, no, actually, studies show and throughout the world that those who come forward with it initiate programs to educate everybody on what happened in World War II, that they move forward quicker. Germany, for example, was successful in bringing an actual democracy after World War II, after all those atrocities that they committed and brought to Slovenia, by the way, as well, right? But they took it on full force. They confronted what Nazism is. They banned it, and they talked about it. And as a result, they're far, far ahead of countries like Slovenia. Even Croatia, I would say, is ahead because it had this rules of the road that I've been explaining. Right? They were educated. They were forced to follow the tribunal's rules. They couldn't just indict Serb and Muslim soldiers if they felt like it. They actually had to prove that they committed a crime, that they beat someone, that they tortured someone, they raped someone. They can't or can't command responsibility over units that did that. They couldn't just indict them for fighting. And so that makes one think, and it brings it out into the public far more than what Slovenia has done.
Beautiful. 1 hour has passed. So
yes,
if no one pushes any buttons, like Mike, the red button, you push it and you can post quick question, or me and Maria will bid you farewell until next time. Please, Maria.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, everyone. Please do ask questions the way Anna did this time. I appreciate them. Then I know where to focus and where to speak. I'm very happy to answer just about any question. And we will prepare another discussion for next week, right, Blaž?
Yeah.
And announce it.
Yeah, thank you very much for your efforts and willingness. And tomorrow we will have a state show, not show, but what's the word? Državna proslava. Can you translate, please?
Me?
Yeah.
Tomorrow? What? Not. It's not the
proslava.
Independence Day. No.
Statehood Day.
Yeah, Independent Statehood Day, right? I mean, with their events, I'm going to the event at Pivka, Pivka.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm sure that there are other, because it's an unveiling of the statute. I'm sure there are other events tomorrow too.
Let's say it's celebration, state official celebration tomorrow on Kongresni Trg. So Kongresni Trg was historically a place of many important meetings and congresses. Anyone who is an aspirant in Slovene history should and must know Kongresni Trg. So, Maria, until next week, we will remain online, and also we will put some topics which we discussed on online at YouTube, for example, and ready for the next week. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Blaž. You've been great doing this all in English. It's tremendous.
Well, one has to learn.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Good night, everyone. Bye.